Good day, Sir Kit. I am Hannah Gilasio, and I will be going to discuss and give some examples of the assumptions about psychological testing and assessment. So let's begin with the first assumption, which is the psychological traits and states exist. So first, let us define what is a trait and a state. So a trait is been defined as any distinguished relatively enduring way in which one individual varies from one another, and a state are being described as one person from another but relatively less enduring. So among them are a psychological traits that related to intelligence, is specific intellectual abilities, cognitive style, adjustment, interests, attitude, sexual orientation and preferences, psychopathology, personality in general, and specific personality traits. So for example, in describing in one person as being confident, or even using the term such as very confident or a high confident, are most people are making understated comparison with the degree of confident that they could reasonably expect in the high person to exhibit the same or similar circumstances. So in psychological assessment, assessors may also make such comparison with respect to the hypothetical high person of confident. So let's go with the second assumption, which is the psychological traits and states can be quantified and measured. The specific traits and states to be measured and quantified need to be carefully defined. Test developers and researchers, much like people in general, have many different ways of looking and defining in the same phenomenon. So for example, of the different ways in such a intelligent is being used, like we give a test to an adult intelligent customer, intelligent parent, we interact an intelligent student. So in each of these different contexts, intelligence carries with its different meaning. So measuring traits and states by means of a test entails developing not only appropriate test items, but also in appropriate ways to score the test and interpret the result. So for many varieties of a psychological test, some numbers representing the score of the test is derived from the examinee's response. So the next assumption is that the test-related behavior predicts non-related behavior. So the objective of the test here is to provide some indications of other aspects of the examinee's behavior. So for example, you let the assessee draw a human being, and such having the guidelines or patterns of the activity, you will identify the person's mental condition by looking his output or on his behavior. So the tasks in some tests mimic the actual behaviors of the test users by attempting to understand. By their nature, however, such test yields only a sample of the behavior that can be expected to be emitted under the context of the conditions, and to obtain sample of behavior is typically used to make predictions about the future behavior, such as the work performance of a job applicant. For the fourth assumption, it is the tests and other measurement techniques have strengths and weaknesses. So here it is being competent test users understand a great deal about the test they use, and they should understand, among other things, how a test was developed and their circumstances in which is appropriate to administer the test, and how the test should be able to administer or to whom, and how the results should be interpreted. So for example, the test user must be aware of the test limitation, the strength and the weaknesses of the tools they use to avoid conflicts of being emphasized in the code of ethics of associations of the assessment of professional. So for the fifth assumption, it is the various source of error are part of the assessment process. So in the context of the assessment, error traditionally refers to something that is more than being expected. It is actually a component of the measurement process. And more specifically, error refers to a long-standing assumption that a factors other than what a test attempts to measure that will influence the performance of the test. So for example, a personality test in which it could be a subject to an error concerning to the degree to which it obtained a score that truly reflects of the examinee's personality and the degree to which it was due to a factors other than the personality. So let's go with the assumption 6, which is the testing and assessment can be conducted in a fair and unbiased manner. So this is the more controversial among the assumptions. And decades of awkward challenges to our various tests and testing programs have sensitized test developers and users to a societal demand for a fair test used in a fair manner. However, despite the best efforts of many professionals, fairness-related problems do occasionally hear. And one source of fairness-related problems is the test users who attempt to use a particular test with people whose background and experience are different from the background and experience of the people for whom the test was being intended. So for example, in hiring, we need to conduct a program or a test, develop instruments that are fair when the use of a strict accordance with the guidance of the test manual. And we are being reminded with this question, what do we do as a society wish to accomplish by the use of the test or the assessment procedure? Assumption 7 is the testing and assessment benefit to society. It is indeed a benefit to a society because testing and assessment helps us to identify our career or path in the future, and we're able to present ourselves as a surgeons, builders, airplane pilots, regardless of our backgrounds, ability, or a professional credentials. And it also helps the schools or the teachers to have to be that instrument to diagnose the educational difficulties of a student, and also to identify the place of a children in which the learner could be assisted. In a world without tests, there would be no instruments to diagnose neuropsychological impairments. In a world without tests, there would be no practical way for a military to screen thousands of recruits with regards to key variables. And considering the many critical decisions that are based on testing and assessment procedures, we are readily appreciate the need of the test, especially to good tests.